We're live. Diana, welcome. And Lisa, welcome. We are getting all of the Korahors together. They're friends of Korahor or fellows or people from the Church of Korahor gathering together in this special edition of Hellfire Agency. I would love to tell you that I have the very person that we had talked about joining us, Rene Steelman from She Became Visible, on the line here in the studio, but we don't. Not sure. Waiting for a text from her to see why she might not have gotten the text in time. This was very last minute. We threw it together. We were going to talk about some true crime stories that she was following up on. We'll catch her at another time. Maybe we'll have her on live on Tuesday for Charlatans Never Change. I'd like to bring on more guests to more programs. And know you guys weigh in from all over the country, all over the globe. We have people who watch the Church of Korahor and Hellfire Agency in Scotland and Germany and like all places all over the world. And you guys know I love to see your bright shining faces. So when if you feel like joining us, I'm going to try and put the link. I'm going to try it. I'm going to try putting the link to the StreamYard into the comments. It's kicked it back before and told me in times past and told me don't be spamming. So, forgive me if I accidentally get my live taken down. But there it is. That's the StreamYard. If anybody wants to join me, I'm going to show you guys some things that have been going on that I've been looking into. I haven't done a lot of Tim Ballard stuff now that I am more or less convinced of the Tim Ballard story. Whew, can I say this with a huge sigh of relief? I think the Tim Ballard story is effectively over. And let me tell you, I have never been more ecstatic to put anything to bed. Tim Ballard made me famous, more or less, on TikTok. And frankly, I hated it. If it wasn't Tim Ballard, it was Ted Bundy. And every time I go deep into these guys' stories, I come out of it like all the time just feeling icky. Because my autistic brain goes down this rabbit holes, I learned things about Ted Bundy I don't think a normal human would want to know. Maybe a normal human should know. And yet, don't even get me started, frankly. Don't get me started on the things the police overlooked about Ted Bundy, things that they missed. Don't get me started about things that they invented. Don't get me started about how Ted Bundy, not just here in Utah, but also in Washington state and all over the country. The Ted Bundy case basically changed the way that policing is done, in some ways for the better, but in a lot of ways for the worse. And I get into these stories and I love it because my autistic noodle goes haywire for, oh my gosh, look at this. Oh my gosh, look at this. Oh my gosh, look at this. But then the longer we get into it, the dirtier I feel, and it can get to an icky place. You got to stay healthy, you got to stay brain healthy if you're going to talk Mormon true crime. In any event, I wanted to show you guys some footage. This is raw. I've been capturing some footage off of Mormon podcasters talking about this Nick. Surely you're not serious. And it's dirty. And again, like I said now many times, we have to be able to talk about our past with racism in Mormon society. And this is one of the shows that's been talking, I feel, disingenuously about it. I don't really feel these guys. I just want to say this. Hayden and Jackson Paul, the hosts of Latter-day Saints, also known as the Stick of Joseph, where they talk about the Book of Mormon, which is called the Stick of Joseph in Mormon, in the Book of Mormon. And I think they're nice guys. I don't think these guys mean any harm. But they need to take responsibility for the harm that they're causing in perpetuating racism that is far too rampant right now in America and around the world. And so I've been calling them out. My hope is at some point we can just put all hatchets aside, set it aside for a time and just come together. I'll go live on their show. They can come live on Hellfire Agency. Nick, Shirley, you're welcome to come on to Hellfire Agency. So is anybody else associated with your story, including David, including your mom, Brooke, Shirley. You know, whatever you want. You know, I will bring on anybody to clear the air and have it out as long as we can keep it civil and just talk about it. I think that we can move on from things. We can move past some things here. Okay? I wanted to show a couple of things from a show. Let's do this one. Okay. Yeah. This is Latter-day Saints talking about Nick Shirley. Nick Shirley in this video about Somali-run daycare centers, which is a total farce. It's not true. It's not real. It's total bullshit. I exposed it on Tuesday. By Wednesday morning, they had surveillance footage confirming that I was right. They are wrong. That, you know, that they made all this up. And yet these Mormon YouTubers and podcasters are still perpetuating these racist tropes. And it's insane. So I guess it has to continue. This is the new Tim Ballard. I called it then. I'm saying it now. This Nick Shirley kid, I am devastated because he is so young to say it. But this kid, Nick Shirley, is now the new Tim Ballard. And what people don't know about him is he's being used. I put to you, this Nick Shirley kid is, I shouldn't call him a kid. He is technically an adult. He is 23 years old. But I tell you, he is being used and his head is being filled with this racist rhetoric. And it has to stop. This is perpetuating the problem. I'm going to open this up just to skip ahead again. This has not been preparation.
Is something that's completely fake, that's built to fool. May not be true, okay, but the story is this: he'd been in charge of a region, and he'd been reporting that it was all prosperous and everyone was happy and it was great. When of course it wasn't. It was Russia, right? So,
oh yeah, now I know what you're saying. Okay, so this guy is Dave Butler. People I know who know Dave Butler describe him as a really nice guy. So I'm just going to preface everything that I'm about to say about him with that. Let me just edit this. I'm not loving the way this is laid out. I'll just put myself here for the time being. Okay. This guy, he is a Mormon apologist. So take it with a grain of salt. You know, nothing strictly wrong with that in and of itself. The thing he's doing right now is they have gone live. This was a broadcast they did this week on Latter-day Saints about the swearing in of Zoran Mamdani and how awful it is for America, effectively, because he's a Muslim and he got sworn in on the Quran by Bernie Sanders, who was a Jew, is a Jew. He was a Jew then, is a Jew now, is always a Jew. And that's not getting mentioned anywhere. Very curious. Very curious. In any event. Hey, Songs. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. Nice to see you. Songs is a longtime friend of ours. She's a friend of ours. So watch some of this. Okay.
Her intention.
So okay. He was referring to that. They're going back to the story now while they're talking about Zoran Mamdani, the new mayor of New York, being in a totally non-racist way. Come on, Dave, I don't know you personally. You're welcome on my show to call me out. Welcome to call me out wherever you are for saying this. Some racist shit, man. That's some this whole thing is gross. It's racist. And you know, and white supremacist. And I'm calling it out. You should be too, man. You shouldn't be making this worse. But you're gonna. But I welcome you to call me out and to have a conversation about it. But of course, this becomes an anti-Islamic trope, which is something Nick Shirley. I keep having to not say Fuentes. That's how gross this is. Frankly, so much of what Nick Shirley says and does is so reminiscent of Nick Fuentes that I have to stop myself and say, this isn't Nick Fuentes, this is Nick Shirley. This isn't the Latino. I think he's Jewish on part of his side. I don't even remember. Anyways, this is not the Latino, popular far right winger who has been proud at times to praise Hitler. This is the American. I'm going to go ahead and say white, according to his own descriptions, mostly Northern European. One of the episodes I may show a little bit of here is him talking about how he used myheritage.com, obviously a paid endorsement, to find out his heritage was all from Northern Europe. I don't know that even if I don't think he should have to be ashamed of that, but anyway. Then it just happened to rub me wrong on the same day that I went to his Facebook page looking to validate a story about Nick Shirley that I still can't be entirely sure is true about his family. And again, he's only responsible for his own behavior, not for what his parents allegedly have done, which is apparently a fraud of their own. We'll find out. I'm looking to validate it. I need more than what I've seen, but it's looking plausible at this point that his parents, Paul Shirley and Brooke Shirley, were involved in a pretty massive fraud here in Utah. In any event, I was looking through his mission photos and found a picture of a castle in Germany, and it said simply that the caption on it said Disney Castle in Germany. And I went, like Disney, like Euro Disneyland or Euro Disney World? That's not. And I looked at it and recognized it. I'm one of these people who, for better or for worse, some people would say for worse, I know a lot about World War II. I looked at that castle and I said, that's not Disney's castle. That's Hitler's castle. That was a castle that a certain young German artist had painted when he quit art and he quit painting and chose to go into a career in politics. And I'm like, and I called it out on that picture on his Facebook page, and I'm already getting hate from people going, don't do that, don't say that. I'm like, well, it's true. And it turns out apparently Walt Disney did like that castle and maybe took some inspiration from it for Cinderella's castle. That doesn't make it Disney's castle. It's very, very, it's disturbing for a young man who has interviewed and platformed people on his show. And I've gotten a few clips before he winds up going back and taking him down from episodes where he interviews and sets up far-right extremists who use crusader language to talk about genocide of Islamic peoples in very plain terms. And then while Mormons sit around going, that doesn't, okay, well, he's just interviewing them, he's just covering the story. You then watch everything he says when he's interviewing immigrants coming over the border in, the US-Mexico border, or when he's talking to Fox News about Somali immigrants, or when he's talking, and it all lines up with everything he's saying. And I'm like, look, if this young man, and he is very young, 23 years old, if he's out there not being a white supremacist, why is he echoing all the white supremacist talking points? So, yeah.
And to go do an inspection, so he's going to ride a riverboat through the territory. Mm-hmm. So he builds a bunch of facades, fake buildings along the river, and he forces peasants to come out there and hold sheaves of weed and loaves.
He's talking about Potemkin. He's talking about Potemkin village. So he's talking about how this story with the daycare centers is a Potemkin village. They're talking about the fact that the news came out this week with footage of Nick Shirley showing up exactly in between 3 different families, Somali families, showing up to one of these daycare centers and dropping off their children, showing up unannounced without warning them that he's coming, shows up for one brief moment and finds that he can't get in to the facility to count how many kids there are before coming back out and filming with his boy David, fake name, admittedly fake name, I'm validating who this guy is. I don't want to dox him. I have said, I don't want to dox you, David. You need to dox yourself because one of us is going to figure it out. If it's not me, somebody's going to dox this guy. Somebody's going to find out who he is and reveal it. I don't want any harm to come to this man. I want to make this clear. I want no harm to come to this man. I want no harm to come to any of these people on account of the racist thing they're doing. They're allowed to be racist. It's a free country. Nobody should bring any harm upon any of them. I'm just making that clear. He is going to get exposed by somebody for the things that he's doing. If it's not because he's calling for these racist tropes, it's going to be because he is making this big stink about how Tim Walz is working with America's enemies, because apparently all Islamic people in the minds of some, all Islamic people are our enemies. And it's insane that that's even a thing that we're doing. I can't believe that I'm living in America and watching.
Even though it's named Quality Leering Center. So and they get $1.9 million a year, but they don't know how to spell learning. And so,
okay, the guy who owns Quality Learning Center, which is Quality Learning Center, obviously put Quality Learning Center on the licensing documents, and he clearly does know how to spell learning. The person who made the sign for their daycare center apparently didn't know, and either the guy who owns it didn't notice it, which is a pretty big goof, or didn't care and just put it up there. Since then, they have changed it. But so their argument now is that now that the news has come out to show, Nick Shirley should be careful and retract what he has said, and his little victory tour he's doing all over the world. It's right. The name of the street name is right on the application or on his paperwork for the licenser. Look, the guy could not speak English. Once again, blaming people and calling them bad or calling them frauds or calling them imposters because they don't speak English is a racist trope. You can say it isn't. That's because you're wrong. English is not everybody's first language. It doesn't have to be everybody's first language. We're not the only civilized people in the world. I hate to shatter anybody's perspective on things. No, I don't. I love doing it. You know what I do. In any event, so they're making the case that this is a Potemkin village, that they have trucked in or bussed in kids from all over to try and justify that they are not really that these daycare centers are open, when the fact of the matter is anybody who has put their kids in daycare in America will tell you, somebody call me out in the comments if this isn't true, is that in today's society, they lock the doors of daycare centers. You can't just wander into a daycare center and say, let me look at your kids, for very obvious reasons. I would hope to think were reasons that were obvious. So because obvious things are not obvious to everybody, I'm just going to just say it. Because we live in a society where people shoot at kids. We live in a society where the Epstein files have revealed prominent, powerful men in our country who have sexualized kids with impunity, and that everybody knows in our society are never going to face justice for it because they are rich and powerful and white. And so, yeah, you can't surprise. Yeah, I don't feel surprised when Somali immigrants or their families, because we don't know that all these people are Somali immigrants, when people of color see a couple of white men surrounded by cameramen, some of whom in some shots it appears are wearing masks to hide their identity, with cameras and microphones, show up to a daycare center and rattling the doors and insisting, let us come in and see how many kids there are. Where are the kids? And you're telling me that you're shocked that these people slammed the door, women left to protect these children and to educate these children, care for these children, slam the door closed and lock it and keep them from coming in. If it was my kids' daycare that you were coming up, sir, and rattling the door saying, let me see them kids, I would hope they did the exact same thing and they got on the horn and called me, and I would leave work. I would leave. I would drop everything that I was doing to come and make your life fucking hell because I'm a good father. Yeah. I'm just gonna say it. So, anyways, here's Hayden Paul talking. I think you're Hayden. Are you Hayden? I don't know.
Actually, if you click the next link here, what's happened at least to one.
Okay. This is a comment I keep getting. I hate to stop to highlight rando comments from strangers over the internet and don't have the courage to hop in the link and show their face. I'm going to go ahead and take that you don't have kids. How are you enrolling children with no reception in front desk? Okay. You enroll children in daycare, usually by getting referred to that daycare or by calling them and making an appointment. I understand that Nick Shirley claims he called the phone number on the sign and talked to these people and tried to talk to these people, but got the answering service of somebody at the state or something like that. We only have his word to go on, but okay, fine. Yeah, well, I'm my face, not yours. There we go. So there, I don't know how many people just don't understand this because you don't have children. But if you think that any person can walk into any daycare in America and just ask to go and look at their children, I'm glad that you don't have children. Because frankly, that is the most disgusting and horrifying thing I think I can imagine. And if it happened at my kid's daycare, you can rest assured I'd find out who it was. I'd find out who you were. That's all I'm going to say about that. Wishing no harm on anyone.
One of these daycares, Dave, is something tragic. Bandits have broken in and stolen money. No.
Okay, random person on the internet who does not do true crime content. Hello. Why do you have only this word? You should call them. You don't you want to know yourself? Okay. Most of these businesses, their listings have been taken down. You haven't done this. You don't know what you're talking about. Okay. Go call your mom and tell her that you're spending too much time on the internet again. Thanks, stranger.
They haven't stolen any money. They've stolen something far more valuable.
The kids.
The proof that would show that kids are actually enrolled there.
They're still talking about this news stories that are proving that Nick Shirley's full of shit. Somebody broke into one of these daycare centers, cut a hole in the wall, and went in there after leaving voicemails. There have been multiple voicemails made into these daycare centers saying, we're coming to get you. I've played them on my TikToks before. I can pull it up and show anybody who doesn't believe them. Believe me, you can also just go and look at it, especially if you look at the local reporting there in Minneapolis. It's pretty clear from the coverage that's going on locally in Minneapolis that these people are being persecuted and they are actually being threatened now. People are sending them death threats. So look, and then all of a sudden, as soon as this video drops, they have the surveillance camera footage of people, other copycats, other people showing up to these same daycare centers, banging on the doors, demanding to see the children. And then when the person behind the door says, you need to leave, I'm calling the police, they suddenly scurry off. And then that same night that happens, somebody broke into one of these daycare centers and stole the children's files and of students who were there. And we already knew that there were students there. As I had said on last Tuesday, I read through the violations report. Most of these daycare centers, yeah, they're bad daycare centers. And that sucks. That's a reason to put more funding into daycare, not less. It's a reason to put more funding into licensing and into training but most of these violations have something to do with the children being put into circumstances where they are in danger because the areas are not accessible, or because they are dirty, or because the kids are not being made to wash their hands, and things like this. Those are violations that don't happen in daycare centers where there aren't children. And these inspections are all within the last 6 months. In some cases, they are from as recently as December. You don't have violations about not taking care of the kids if there are no kids. And that's not the records at the daycare centers. It's the records of the state licensing agents who are out there doing the inspections.
Oh, of course. They stole the registration.
registration.
Okay, so now they're out there saying that these Somali immigrants and persons running these daycare centers are hiding the enrollments or there just aren't any, and they're just faking the break-ins. They're actually cutting holes in the walls of their own daycare facilities, making more violations that they could be found, that could endanger their license in their conditional licensing in Minnesota, just to try and blame their lack of records for kids on these men who showed up at their daycare center creepily banging on the door and demanding to see their children. I'm just saying that's what's being painted here with a big sign behind your frickin' head, Hayden. If I seem pissed, it's because I'm pissed on behalf of Mormons, dude, that you got this sign says Latter-day Saints behind you and coming out with this extremely racist trope and accusation against these people. So in any event, so this is just part of it. Let me not waste too much time on this. Okay, so then they talked about the Patrick Bet-David interview. Again, I could go on and on about Patrick Bet-David, but I don't necessarily want him to get his hooks into me. I've leaned into him before, and he's got a lot of fans who are quite gross. I did want to show you more footage, though. So this is some more footage that I am adding into this week's episode. Okay. Okay, let's just throw this in there. So, Stick of Joseph, that's Hayden, in this case, Hayden Paul, went live yesterday, day before, Friday on Ward Radio. Friday, I think, yeah.
Rallies and crazy stuff going on. And didn't he even get invited to the White House?
Yeah, he was invited to the White House a couple months back and spoke along with some other independent.
I forget this guy's name. I don't recognize him. I think he's new to the space and maybe tangentially connected to everything.
Journalists to actually, like President Trump himself, concerning kind of media and the state of the country. He said, and it's interesting, Politico, or NPR rather, they reported on it, and they titled it like, here's what you need to know about Nick Shirley, as if there's this big expose, and all they expose is, he did prank videos on YouTube. But yeah, he talked with Trump and talked about how he said actually of the 15 countries he had been in, the most dangerous was the United States for him to be a journalist in. So because of all of like the protests that had been happening around the country. So yeah, he was in the White House.
Yeah, but
so this is when he got on my radar, is when he just started going down to the big caravans that were coming over during the Biden administration and just literally embedding himself in a caravan full of hold on.
Okay. So in that beautiful shot of Cardinellis, Cardinal, go ahead and take it down from the screen after a moment. Okay, you're welcome. Yes, it's true that Nick Shirley makes videos almost exclusively about immigration. His mother also makes TikToks exclusively about immigrants in just about the most disgusting stories you've ever heard. You may have seen that on Wednesday after the news and podcasters like me started taking live to go, this guy's full of crap. You can look into the public records. You can now see the surveillance footage. You can now see they actually took cameras into these daycare centers and filmed children at play in the daycare center, a thing that most parents would say, I don't think I like that. And so they blurred the faces of these kids so that, because they fear what will happen to these children, as any caring parent would. Okay. But they're trying to prove that this guy's full of shit. And so now once that happened, Nick Shirley's mom, just identified as Nick Shirley's mom, Brooke Shirley, starts going on conservative media to defend. I can't believe they're saying this about my son. He's a good boy. He's a blah, blah, blah. Her name is Brooke Shirley. She goes on TikTok by a fake name, Brooker T. Jones. Any person who knows who Booker T. Jones is should be a little suspicious. She herself, I have an interview with her and a very far right podcaster. She went on the show, this very far right podcaster. I'm going to save that for Tuesday. Talking about how when she was a kid, people called her Brooke T or Brooker T. And so when she decided to start a TikTok channel where she interviews people and does broadcasts about immigration policy, she decided to make a fake name, and Jones is a common name, so she calls herself Brooker T. Jones. Weird. That's some weird shit, man. But anyways, she's taken off. She's become very popular in the conservative circles, going out there, going live or doing interviews on TikTok, saying some pretty racist BS about immigrants. One of the stories, and basically now that her son is back from his mission, about 2 years apparently, from Chile, she has started to take him along, and she talks about this in multiple interviews she gives with Newsmax, about how she now travels the country with her son because he speaks Spanish, and has him go live on or make videos. I don't know how often he goes live. I don't think he actually does live. He make videos interviewing immigrants coming over the border from Mexico because he speaks Spanish. And then they started doing interviews on Newsmax together, and she's been on multiple episodes now and my son, who's recently home from his Mormon mission to Chile, and so obviously not racist. And then she has him open his mouth, and frankly, he looks like, I mean, his early interviews, maybe he's just nervous, and he is still quite young. And this is going back a couple of years. They've been doing this since at least 2022, I want to say. 2023. They've been doing this. He looks like he's a prisoner, like he's reading a prepared statement. And then he's gotten better and better at it. Now he does interviews on his own, and he says some pretty marginalizing things about marginalized people. And I'm sorry, but now, young though he is, he's an adult, and now he gets to be called out, and he gets to face the backlash for saying racist shit. So anyways, and now the Mormon podcasters are coming out to defend him. I'm just going to call this out. Cardinellis, you're welcome to, host of whatever this program is now. Former host and showrunner of Tits, which that's what they call it. That is called This Is the Show. They were proud at one point to abbreviate it as Tits. I get it. I have a crass sense of humor, sometimes referred to the Church of Korihor as cock, because I think it's funny. And I didn't think about that when I filed the paperwork and called this the Church of Korihor. But I get it. Okay. Cardin, you're welcome to call me out. You're welcome to face me directly. I'll do it. And we can have a civil conversation. I actually think you are one of the people who's capable of having a civil conversation, even though I don't like you. I've called you out multiple times for misogyny. I've called you out multiple times for saying some very prejudiced things. But I don't think that means that we can't have a conversation about this. You're coming out making defenses of this kid like you guys did about Tim Ballard. And this is the reason why I said before, I want this on record, before the Paul brothers went on Ward Radio, and before, as far as I knew, Ward Radio had made almost any comment about this. They were one of the few podcasters who hadn't made a comment about Nick Shirley and said, this kid is the new Tim Ballard. He's going to be the guy they're going to have to distance themselves from later when they find out how much filth is in his past. And it turns out he fits the exact description of everything that people are saying is so wrong about the racism inside the far right movement. And when, at some point they had to stop platforming Tim Ballard. And you know what point that was? When Tim Ballard came out and started saying the biggest culprit, when Tim Ballard was excommunicated from the Mormon Church, apparently lost his appeal. Forgive me, a little gassy. Apparently lost his appeal to be rebaptized into the Mormon Church, and now has come forward to say he's going to expose the Mormon Church as being at the center of the real trafficking, in spite of the fact that all he has managed to do is to fall from grace and lose every friend he has in the Mormon space, as it became more and more clear that everything that used to defend Tim Ballard about and say he's not this, he's not that, he's not trafficking people, he's not sexualizing his employees, he's not, he's not some extremist in the Lori Vallow cult, the Mormonism inside prepper cult. He's not any of those things, and now they don't want to talk about it, because it turns out everything we said about Tim Ballard from the beginning was true. And it's just getting proven over and over again. So now they need a new Tim Ballard, and this kid's going to do it. Look, I don't think that this young man, I don't agree with him on most things, but I think he's too young. I think he's too young to be your new Tim Ballard. And I think that you guys should let him off the hook. And I fear for this kid when he has to look back later in his life and realize how far indoctrinated he was into this extremism. So let's skip ahead. They talk about, well, let me just show. I'm just going to choose some random moments here. This is the point where I bought a super chat. To the best of my knowledge, I don't think they ever actually read the super chat.
Actually covered a story in Utah. He covered how Utah had kind of secretly and quietly become a sanctuary state, and did some coverage about, like the driver privilege car.
And that's when they played an ad on YouTube. Let me play you another clip from another video. Let me go ahead and bring up, because he does do stories here in Utah. He's from Utah. Not surprised. Not sure why those. This one is a little sensitive. The guy he has as a guest on this show, I don't love the things that he says all the time, but the guy himself, I haven't had personal interaction with him directly. He has been platformed on Ward Radio before and other programs before. His name is Shane. He has branded himself as the Mormon Wolf of Wall Street. I'm going to show you this.
House for Warren Jeffs.
For decades, the Fundamentalist Church of Jesus.
So they did an episode basically putting Warren Jeffs on blast. Okay. And they talk about, and it's interesting to me because once again, you have these shadows of Mormonism and Mormonism's dark past coming up again and again, and they'll make mention of it briefly that, this is part of Nick Shirley's own past. It's also part of mine. So don't anybody go and think it's, that I'm shaming anybody for who their ancestors are. This is my ancestors if it's anybody's. And, but they label all these things. They're so shameful and awful about Warren Jeffs and don't make any mention of Joseph Smith did all of this, or they do. And then they don't want to talk more about it. But anyways, I just want to preface this by saying that his guest on this, he branded himself as the Mormon Wolf of Wall Street. He rose to some prominence in Mormon society when he wrote a book about how he, and I wish I remember the title of the book, when he wrote a book about how he reconverted to Mormonism while he was in prison for fraud. He was engaged in real estate fraud. here in Salt Lake City.
Leader Warren Jeffs at one point was on the FBI's most wanted list and now leads his church from a prison cell as he receives his revelations for what is left of his 80 wives and the remaining followers as he serves a life sentence after he was convicted of sexually assaulting 2 underage girls whom he considered his spiritual wives. Today, I'm taking you deep into the FLDS. And joining me is a fellow member of the original LDS Church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, who is a host of a popular podcast called Zion's Media, who will help explain in depth the history of the FLDS. And before I entered into the FLDS capital, I wanted to know my history as I am from Utah and have been interested to know where my history comes from and see if I have polygamy in my family tree like most.
He does. Not a big surprise. So Shane Baldwin, you saw there, had Brian Hales on Zion Media before. Zion Media has not always been considered a fringe podcast. They are a bit of a fringe podcast now. And frankly, I kind of like them. I started covering some of their stuff. I haven't done any scandalous videos about them because frankly, I kind of like the direction that they're going spiritually since they got rid of Mitiga. But anyways, so I started covering them because of their association with Mitiga. This is the video I was talking about in a sermon just a few minutes ago. About my heritage. Apparently they got paid to cover my heritage, and excuse me, sorry, I recently found out that I can do that and mute my microphone. Sorry, I'll do that in the future. It turns out my heritage is really shady. Anyways, so this is the part of the video where Nick shows off announces that all of his heritage is from Northern Europe, as if that's not something we would expect.
Tracking down my family's past, and after thinking I was clear of polygamy, I learned that my great-great-great-grandpa had 4 wives.
Yeah, learned that from myheritage.com. Yes. Sorry. Anyway.
Well, number one, the LDS no longer practice polygamy. That's
okay. So this is Shane, again, who I kind of like, especially since he basically kicked Chief Mitiga out of their midst for being abusive. This is my interpretation. Shane, you're welcome to correct me, for being verbally abusive of their people. I gained a lot of respect for Shane when he did that. Chief Mitiga, I am gaining a little more respect for him now that he appears to be not backing off of his claims, but at least backing down from trying to take over the Mormon sector and try and claim that he is basically the Davidic servant and that he is revealing new Mormon scripture, etc. Shane's about to say some things, though, that I want to highlight here. This is how Nick Shirley is uses interviews with other people to say things and put on them to say things that frankly are sketchy.
I would think the biggest difference. So the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or the Mormons, decided no longer to practice polygamy in 1890. Now, prior to that, they were practicing polygamy. And so polygamy was instituted in the late 1830s in the Mormon Church. And by about 1890, it was a disaster. You can imagine it's a problem. Ultimately, what happened is there were some people that were like, hey, I kind of like this polygamy thing. And so they broke off and ended up in this area in Colorado City. They're now known as the FLDS, but their ancestors started out as members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And they consider themselves like the purists. They consider themselves the ones that are living the law that was given to Joseph Smith, and that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is currently in apostasy.
Okay. Did I say I like Shane? Generally, I like him. And Shane, I'm not saying this out of malice towards you, okay? You know that's a lie. They're right, the fundamentalists. They are fundamentalists. They have stayed true to what Joseph Smith taught them. That's what Warren Jeffs is. I'll get called out for this by many a Mormon. I don't care. I've been before. I've placed it everywhere that I can. I say, tell me one thing that Warren Jeffs is in prison for that Joseph Smith didn't do, or Brigham Young, or frankly Lorenzo Snow. All of the claims I'm about to play clips of for you here about polygamy, I'm going to say this. They're going to play it off like it's not true, like it's only true about the FLDS. It's not true about the LDS. You look up two names, Lorenzo Snow, and there's so many canons, I forget which one is and Cannon. Look up the canons. What's his name? This is in the First Presidency, Cannon. Yeah, look up the canons. Look up canon and prison polygamy. You get the full download. Everything that the FLDS are suffering for now, the LDS have done in the past.
And they are actually doing what God has commanded them to do.
Even though their prophet, Warren Jeffs, is in prison.
Even though their prophets and in prison, they still think they're on the right path. Now,
okay, thing I got specifically not mentioned here, Shane, I'm sorry, I'm calling you out, buddy. Okay, just fair is fair, okay? They're saying that because the FLDS prophet, one FLDS prophet, wound up in prison, obviously he's a bad person. Obviously he's not a real prophet. Right hard on, having said, the Mormons, the LDS, stopped practicing before 1890, stopped practicing polygamy, and not mentioning that the revelation, which is not really a revelation, is a church policy, was actually in response to a revelation that Wilford Woodruff claimed, in which he claimed that all the members of the priesthood leadership, the 15 men who are the primary leaders of the Mormon church, that is to say the First Presidency and the Quorum of the 12, would wind up in prison if they did not stop the practice of polygamy. At no point in Mormon scripture does it say that polygamy was wrong. At no point in Mormon scripture does it say that polygamy is no longer the law, and that is something that Mormon prophets have leveraged since then to practice another form of spiritual spirit wifery when it comes to being sealed to additional wives after their wife has passed away, which shouldn't be a controversial thing. People get remarried inside of Mormonism. It is still covered under this brand of polygamy. And so because in Mormonism, polygamy never really went away, it stopped. It was announced that they would stop practicing. Wilford Woodruff, the prophet, announced they were going to stop practicing because he didn't want all of them to go to prison. Then, and he was lying when he said that, because he went on personally to marry more women and to marry more women to other men. He just went and did it in secret. And they continued to practice it anyway, well into the 20th century. And then it had to actually stop the practice when they got caught. So I'm just saying. And the reason why they did that, Q Cannon. What's his first name? George Q. Cannon. Thank you, Songs. George Q. Cannon was a member of the Mormon First Presidency, who he's a prophet who went to prison. He wasn't the only one. I just don't know any other names. That's the ones I know off the top of my head. They went to prison for practicing polygamy. Being a Mormon prophet who got sent to prison doesn't mean Mormons no longer believe that he's the prophet. They still talk about George Q. Cannon. They still read quotes from him in conference. He went to prison for doing exactly what Warren Jeffs did. And again, you look at Lorenzo Snow, who married girls as young as 15 years old and had children. When he died, a very old man, had his youngest child was something like 4 years old. He had children by these young women and girls. I say young women. In some instances, they are girls.
Since he's been arrested, they've kind of fallen off a little bit. But in 1953 is when they really started to come to gained some traction, and by about 1986, they formally organized as the FLDS.
And before we went into Warren Jeff's old stomping grounds where he used to house all of his wives and children, we headed into town to see if anybody is still practicing polygamy and if anybody is still following.
Long story short, and again, I'll probably only keep a few of these things in there. What they do is they go through and they do exactly what they did in Minneapolis. They go to this building that is very clearly an apartment building. Yes, that appears to be a renovated house of Warren Jeff's where he would keep his wives. Gross. And they go knocking door to door. Turns out it's not very popular to live in Warren Jeff's old house where he kept his wives, but some people are forced to live there. And Shane even mentions about one of these women, this woman who answers the door, that they finally find somebody there, that she doesn't look, that he has a dark feeling, that, you know, the spirit, that there's no spirit there, or there's a bad spirit there. He can tell there's a bad spirit there, meaning that she is probably, that she looks like she's very poor, or like she's on drugs or something like that, which is another thing that's not mentioned enough about Colorado City. Wish you guys would. That in this region, I'm in southern Utah now. I've actually thought about doing some content of my own in Colorado City, because there is some interesting things developing out there. That there's a lot of drug use there. I mean, a lot of drug abuse, and inside the FLDS, drug abuse is not uncommon among the men in the FLDS church. So, just bringing that up. I'm surprised when it doesn't get brought up more.
Like apartment.
What was this place?
It was a house.
Oh, it was, wow. It feels like a church or something.
For Warren Jeffs.
Somebody should look into this. It says it's sober living, but she just said it's apartments.
It's just apartments. And she looked like she was like not doing well. Personally, she was all like huddled up in the blanket. It smelled weird in there. Like, I got bad energy.
Yeah.
I got heartburn right now, and so
I haven't been able to validate this that it's actual sober living, but if you know, sober living establishments, they're a pretty mixed bag. A lot of sober living establishments are frankly sketchy. I'm not going to say much about how much I know about that, but I know a little bit. I know enough. I know enough to know a lot of sober living establishments. Everybody's high, and you know, it's a problem. But to go and it's a problem that we should talk about. And going there and saying, and frankly, guys, Shane, I'm sorry to say this because I don't want to upset you, because I do like you, but just saying, oh, there's a dark spirit there, isn't helping the situation. Okay, use accurate language. She looks like she's high. If this is sober living and it looks like she's high, you don't have to report her or shame her, but it at least is a reason to have a conversation about, you know, we don't do enough to support people who are addicts and people who are unsheltered or shelter insecure because they're addicted to drugs. And that's an opportunity to talk about it, not just say, oh, this is because of Warren Jeffs. Warren Jeffs didn't help the situation, that's for sure, but he's in prison. But this is what they do. They find out what these places are. They find out the hours. They find out how many people are actually there. And then they go and make content by filming there when it's off hours, or when when enrollment is low, or what have you, and paint an image about, oh, there's this tremendous amount of fraud going on. But that's because they need eyeballs. It is YouTube. Nobody knows that better than I do. They're making a story, and the story is this is what Warren Jeff's style of polygamy will bring a town to, will bring a society to, and not paying any attention to the fact that that's how this whole state was built, dude. That this is the story of the LDS, if it's the story of anyone.
And they have bastardized that use of that word by saying, this is Zion. Here, come live in this compound, have many wives, lots of kids, and this is God ordained, and this is what they would call Zion. For me, this feels like hell.
Okay. Shane, that's a lie, buddy. Okay. You know as well as I do, I would hope you know as well as I do, both of us being from the Morridor, that everything that Warren Jeffs and the FLDS claim is Zion, their place of refuge from the world, is exactly the way the LDS described it in their own establishments in Ohio, in Missouri, in Illinois, and here in Utah, and Arizona, and Idaho, and Nevada, and Southern California, and Wyoming. I mean, this is their story. You don't have to love it, but the FLDS story is the LDS story. This is the difference is they went back to practicing it the pure way, and everything. Again, I just say it the way I've said it before. Name me one thing that Warren Jeffs is in prison for that Joseph Smith didn't do, or Brigham Young, or John Taylor, or Lorenzo Snow, or Wilford Woodruff. Polygamy is not something we have to make excuses for. We can acknowledge it. This is why I love the Karen Hyatts. Sorry if those of you who are outside of the Mormon paradigm and are just stumbling onto this, but this is why I love the Karen Hyatts, frankly. I love the Michelle Stones, these people who are polygamy deniers, who I look at them and I say, look, I hate that they are coming out there and trying to excuse Joseph Smith from the practice of polygamy. I'm getting messages that I need to be working. They're trying to excuse Joseph Smith from his own polygamy and his own practices because they want to believe in Mormonism. They want to believe in the Book of Mormon, in spite of all the racist things that are in there, in spite of all the very misogynistic tropes that it has pushed, in spite of its marginalization. They want to protect it, but there's no but every time that you protect it, you're just making the perpetrator innocent, look innocent, and that's only making the problem worse. Joseph Smith was the originator of Mormon polygamy. It's one situation where the Mormon Church is telling the truth. Don't discourage them from that. However, what I see, and I've made YouTube videos and TikToks about this before, what I see in Mormon polygamy deniers like Karen Hyatt or Michelle Stone or Jeremy Hoop is a hope from these people that they can acknowledge that Mormon polygamy is trafficking, and that it's wrong. Cut Joseph Smith out of it, and I think you are doing wrong because Joseph Smith was the originator of this. The proof is overwhelming. And I understand that you guys want to believe in Mormonism, believe in the Mormon paradigm. Again, it's exactly what I've been saying about racism and the Book of Mormon, about racism and Mormon and the Utah War, about racism and this very racist concept of the Lamanites blossoming as the rose in the wilderness or in the desert. This is, you can say that you appreciate the sacrifice that these people made. You can say that you appreciate their faith and their pilgrimage without condoning the racism, without condoning misogyny, and still call out that polygamy was wrong. Lots of Mormons out here wish that they could do it. I know Mormons, people who still practice the faith, who wish that they could publicly say it, in spite of the fact that, but don't, for the very thing that happened to Karen Hyatt just a couple of weeks ago, who had the audacity to go public and state publicly what Michelle Stone, for very reasonable reasons, is afraid to do, take a hard stand here and say she thinks that polygamy is wrong. And that's why she believes Joseph Smith didn't do it, because she thinks that Joseph Smith is the kind of upstanding moral character who wouldn't engage in the things in this polygamy in spite of the overwhelming historical evidence about it. I've talked about this in past episodes. I'm like, you read the minutes of the excommunication of Oliver Cowdery, the man who, with the pen behind the Book of Mormon, kicked out of the church 8 years in. to the church's existence, a man who was right hand to Joseph Smith, the man who was the historian of the Mormon church, kicked out of the church. Why? It says plainly right there, he accused, he tried to assassinate the character of Joseph Smith by accusing him of adultery with a girl who lived in his house. That's how we know about Fanny Alger. Yes, in some other descriptions by Oliver Cowdery, it says an affair or it says a scrape. But the men who kicked him out of the church, of whom Joseph Smith was one, said he accused Joseph Smith of adultery. That's only got one definition. You can say that scrape means anything or that affair means anything. That's just gross, guys. Let that go, okay? That's gross, okay? Because the definition, according to the High Council, of what he had accused Joseph Smith of was adultery, and particularly adultery with a girl who lived in his house, who regarded him like her father, like as if she was his own daughter. That's Fanny Alger. I don't care what spin you get Don Bradley to put on it. That's sex with Joseph and an underage girl. It's everything that Warren Jeffs is in prison for. So it's remarkable to me to think that somebody can be held up to the world as exposing fraud while perpetuating fraud, and then say, well, no, he served a mission for the Mormon church down in Chile. Okay. Which means what? They're never more missionaries. They're never former Mormon missionaries or Mormons who engage in fraud. He's talking to one. I don't bring this up much about Shane Baldwin because, again, I kind of like him. I think he's a personable guy who is pursuing a spiritual path that is not considered strictly Orthodox Mormonism right now. And he had the courage to stand up to Chief Mitiga, and that was big to me. That was big to me, Shane, when you see this, which you probably won't. Okay? But this man was convicted of fraud. But you know what? He admits to it. He kind of makes hay about it, but fine, whatever. Everybody's got to make hay about their story somewhere. And he served his time. And he came out of it and admitted that he did it, that he was a criminal, and that he had reformed his behavior. And I think that if we are going to live in a society where we believe in justice, and we believe in redemption, and we believe in healing from past behaviors, both our personal past behavior and of past generations, we have to allow Shane Baldwin and men like Shane Baldwin, people like Shane Baldwin, that opportunity and say, okay, yeah, he committed a crime. Yeah, he went to prison. Now he's out there saying that Warren Jeffs can't be a true prophet because he went to prison, because he's in prison. In spite of the fact that everything that Warren Jeffs did to get in prison, Joseph Smith did. And so did his successors all the way down to what? Heber J. Grant, I think. Okay. And that Shane himself has gone to prison. He's gone to prison, did his time, let him thrive. That's what I say. I say if we as people are going to believe that we have a just system and that America is worth saving, that America is worth preserving, and I think it is, we have to be able to believe that it's possible for a family to outlive racism. We have to be willing to believe and hopeful that a person can outlive their own racism, that a person can, and similarly, we can outlive misogyny. We can outlive patriarchy. We can outlive extremism of any type. And a person can change their ways. We can even outlive criminal behavior. And I wish that I could get at least somebody who's out here pushing Nick Shirley's crap that's been debunked about these Somali immigrants all being the way that he's describing it, all being frauds because they are immigrants from an Islamic, predominantly Islamic society. and that's just the way these people are, and then saying, I can't believe people are going to out me as being racist or being or is an Islamophobe for saying that. Suddenly you can't say anything in this country. Yeah, you can't say that and then claim it's not racist when it's very clearly racist. And there are people who will defend him. I wish these Mormon podcasters would stop, because let Patrick Bet David run with this. He's clearly not afraid of being called Islamophobe and racist. Let these guys from outside the Mormon paradigm tie it to conservatism, tie it to MAGA, tie it to Trump, tie it to whatever they want. But they can tie it to whatever they want. I got Diamond Dave in the studio. I want to say hi to him because I miss this kid. So we're going to bring him on here in a minute. Let these people outlive it. And frankly, let Mormonism be free of more Tim Ballards. I ask you guys in the Mormon podcasting realm, on behalf of Mormons I know and love. And I do. I know Mormons. I love Mormons. People are always shocked to hear this. There are Mormons in my family. There are Mormons who are neighbors of mine. There are Mormons who are coworkers of mine. There are Mormons who have hired me. There are Mormons who have fired me. There are Mormons in my extended family. There are Mormons, in my in-laws I love very much, and they're Mormons. I have, people in my Mormon mission I still talk to. One of my dear friends, Eddie, is a guy I served with on my mission to Peru. Yeah, those of you out there who think that, you can only be a virtuous person if you were ever Mormon, your boy Joe served in the Peru Lima North mission from 1999 to 2001. Returned with honors, the whole bag. I've written a whole book about it, The Core Horror Argument. Might check it out. I'm coming out with an Audible book version of it here soon. In any event, I've talked and rambled for a while. Yeah, sadly, Rene couldn't make it to the show. I haven't heard back from her yet. Hopefully we'll get it. We'll get him on. And I do have to go to do some work here soon. But I have my dear friend, a good man, Diamond Dave here in the studio. I'm going to add him to the stage so we can say hello. Let me see if I can. Hey, Diamond Dave, how you doing, brother?
You're giving me way too much credit calling me a good man. I don't consider myself a good man or a bad man. I'm just me, and people can make their own freaking judgments.
I disabused Diamond Dave of the accusation that he is a good man. This man is an asshole.
This is something I've encountered. I don't know. This is something that I've encountered, especially in the Exmo community leaving the church. It's like everyone, when people leave, they've got their own moral structure now, right? They have their own moral structure. They have their own ethical structure. Sometimes I fit into that. Sometimes I don't. And then some of my views that don't even apply in America are just kind of mind-blowing to people. But Songs, what's up? Yeah, so... This
is interesting. You've talked about this before, Dave. Is that you came to, you're not from America originally. Is that right? You were born in India.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm a dual citizen of the United States and America. So I spent most of my life in America. My father's from England. I haven't really been to England since I was a kid, and I have a British passport, but that's literally me as a literal child. But my American passport is the long hair and the beard and how you know me now. So,
but I mean, you were living in the Midwest, right? When you came into contact with Mormonism, is that?
Yeah, I was actually, and here's the thing, because I saw someone talking about the Somalis in Minneapolis. I was in Minneapolis. I've seen the George Floyd riots. I actually went to the mosque of Mahmoud. How do you pronounce his name? Mahmoud Ambalaya, I think it is.
No idea.
He's the owner of Cup Foods that called the police on George Floyd. I've been to his mosque. I was friends with him. I was friends with him on Facebook. Yep, he goes to the Brooklyn Park Mosque. So I've been following the whole Somali daycare meme thing, and I want people to understand it's not just Somalis, right? Because everyone's like, oh, it's the Somalis that are doing this. If you go to Minneapolis, you can register a non-existent address as a daycare. I've seen white folks do this. I've seen black folks do this. I've seen Asian folks do this. I was a branch banker at Wells Fargo in Minneapolis, and there were people like, I want to open a daycare business, and they have the appropriate paperwork. But occasionally I would Google map their address, and it would be like this dilapidated house. And I'm like, legally, I can't discriminate, but I don't think this is real. Right. So it's
Right.
not a Somali thing. It's that the whole system itself is just broken. And another example isn't of like the fraud in Minnesota. If you look at the COVID era, a lot of PPP loans, the small business loans, most of those in Minnesota were fraudulent because specific documentations that verify you were a business owner weren't always required in the SBA website.
Yeah.
So it's not like I just lose my mind when people on like the conservative side are just like, oh, this is the Somalis that are like taking advantage of us. It's like, no, it's like the Minnesota system is broken, just
Let's
all around.
So let's reconcile where you and I are agreeing here, I think, and then address some of these points where it's interesting for me to. I'd like to ask you about this but part of the problem, and the reason why I have called this out as being racist, this Nick Shirley video and and his coverage of the circumstance, is that they are only looking at the Somali community when,
Correct.
just like you're saying, fraud in the whole bureaucrat run ecosystem, whether it's about daycare centers or it's about homeless shelters or whether
housing
it's
is another one. Housing grants is huge in Minnesota. That was something else that I don't know if it was Nick Shirley or but it's been talked about, right? Like the housing grants is in Minnesota is also broken. Right.
And then
So
feeding children and things like that. Okay, fraud. What we're saying is, if you think white people aren't committing fraud in these sectors, you're crazy. You're just not looking at it, right? And that's where I
exactly.
think we're agreeing at. And so to
Yeah.
call it out and then attach it to Islam or to attach it to Somaliland or to Somalia, to attach it to immigration specifically and entirely, and immigrants, and saying this is just the way these people are, this is just what these people do, is fundamentally racist, even though it appears inside their minds and to their audience as just
Yeah.
stating facts. But it's like, if you think white people don't commit fraud, you don't know the story of Nick Shirley's family. Apparently, I'm still validating this, but apparently his parents were engaged in real estate fraud here in the West, so in Western U.S. So, but I'm going to try to validate that as close as I can, which is not Nick Shirley's fault if he is. It's just sad that he's out here blaming Mexican immigrants for everything under the sun, blaming Somali immigrants for everything under the sun, and reinforcing all of these racist tropes, and then saying, don't call it racism when it's just facts. That's the way racist people do this. So.
Yeah, well, and I mean, here's the thing. I don't know Nick Shirley. I want to give everyone a benefit of the doubt, especially because I have like views that don't make sense in America. But if you were ask me about it and then compare it to like Mongolia or China or like other parts of the world, be like, okay, that's in line with how their culture is, right? So I do want to give him the benefit of the doubt. In the best case scenario, the very best case scenario I could see is like he's willfully ignorant because he's looking at these communities and he's like, oh, well, that's what they're doing. But what I don't think he realizes is that, immigrants naturally will go for government resources because it's much harder for them to get a job and it's much harder for them to like integrate, especially if they just moved to a country. Like I just moved to Mongolia, guys. I moved to Mongolia in April. Okay. And even though their structure is different, it's still a very big challenge to move to a fundamentally different culture than what you're used to.
Okay.
But so I would say in the best case scenario, he's willfully ignorant because I mean, there are, born and bred white folks, black folks that will take advantage of the system. Why? Because, I mean, well, we grow up there and we already know how the system works. So it's going to be much easier for us if we speak the language, we speak English, we grew up in the area, we know who's in charge of what, we know how the system works. It's going to be much easier, especially for white people, to just go in and game the system, you know? And I mean, I could tell you right now, they never, some people got it, some people didn't. But I mean, some people that were busted for the fake PP loans were actually like white people in my neck of the woods. I lived in Edina, Minnesota, which is a wealthy area. Minnetonka, Apple Valley, these are predominantly white areas. And I mean, you know, it's kind of the logic that, well, if the state is going to give out free money, and
I
it's
might as
easy
well
to
get
get that
some.
free money,
Yeah.
I mean, why not? You know,
White people do it
and
all the time. Here in
yeah,
Utah, do it all the time.
oh,
And
exactly, yeah. And
and
so
it's just it's
it's
not a
not
Somali
a
thing. It's
race
not a
thing.
black person thing. It's not a person of color thing. It's an
It's
American thing, if anything.
well, yeah. I mean, that's it's very much an American thing, because it's like we want to make the most amount of money for the least amount of effort.
That's
Well,
right.
I mean, if the state's giving out free money, why would you not take advantage of it? I tried to get a PPP loan for my streaming business, but it wasn't registered. That was the only thing I needed. I needed to prove it was registered and not a sole proprietorship. That was
Yeah.
it. And I could have easily gotten $50,000. And I'm sitting here going, son of a bitch. Like, I should have gotten it registered in 2018 as an LLC. But of course, nobody knew COVID was going to happen. So,
And let's not
you know,
pretend like we aren't always overlooking, whenever we talk about fraud in any community in America, that there are sitting members of Congress who took millions and millions in PPP loans for their small businesses they owned on the side, and then voted to forgive their own loans, as if
well,
that
yeah.
wasn't the plan all along.
Well, and what a lot of people did, and this, I'm going to be honest, this is my strategy because it's technically unethical, but it's completely legal, right? So from a legal perspective, let's say my streaming business is registered, right? I make an easy $50,000. Suddenly it implodes. Oh, I can't stream anymore because my cat ate my computer, whatever, right? Well, yeah, cats are wild, right? Well, here's the thing. If you could prove your business went under, you don't have to pay it back, you know, right? So, and that's what you'll see in Minnesota and a lot of other cases where people are like pointing out the fraud is magically a lot of small businesses that took their loans, you know, 2, 3, 4 weeks later, suddenly they just declared bankruptcy, they go under.
Right.
Right.
Something
And I mean, it's completely legal. So,
yeah, something that's fascinating to me. I mean, along the same lines, I think what you're saying is that I go along. I hear people now; they're already bringing it back to Joe Biden. I mean, they wanted to pin as much on Tim Walz. Look, Joe Biden, feel about how you want him, however you want Tim Walz. I'm not a Democrat. I don't throw water for the Democrats, even though I mainly vote Democrat, and I'm public about that. But the fact of the matter is that you look at the clemency records. You know, I'm hearing people say a lot now. Well, of course, in a Democrat-run city and state, there's going to be all this fraud. They try to tie it back to Joe Biden provided clemency to more people than any president in history, without bringing up that the clemency, the pardons that Joe Biden granted, were to people who were serving. The reason why there's so many is because he pardoned so many people who were only serving time for drugs, mainly for marijuana-related offenses that we've known for a long time were really just an excuse to arrest people of color for something that just as many white people are doing. And it just became a way to stack private prison companies full of people of color who then got farmed out to incarcerated slavery to go and work for corporations. In Texas, they have prisoners working at a minimum wage of $0 an hour. Somebody tell me out there what that is. Working, bending their backs in the sun, picking cotton. I mean, here in Utah, Bullfrog Spas for a while, I think they stopped doing it, had a facility where they were using prison labor to build people's hot tubs, and so it's like this is a fraudulent system that some people try to take advantage of and make political gains out of because they're politically connected. And a lot of times that has to do with race, and it has to do with their immigration status, et cetera.
Well, and I mean, it's not just blue states, it's red states. I mean, I've seen it in Utah. It just looks different. Blue states tend to be more bureaucratic and have a lot more committees from my personal experience. And when you have that many people, that many committees and many people, the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. It's easy for someone to fall through the cracks and, a bunch of shit happens. But I mean, in the red states where they tout less government, you have less people. Right. So all it takes is you look at the Mormon church or you look at like a red state like Utah, you only need 2 or 3 people at the top who are like buddy, and then they run the thing and then they just farm everything. Right. It's the same fraud. It's just slightly different in application.
Right.
Right.
I mean, you look at states where they decriminalize marijuana, crime goes down. It drops off a cliff. Here in Utah, we voted to decriminalize a predominantly Mormon state, like other predominantly Mormon states or largely Mormon states like Arizona, voted to decriminalize it. And then it was the Mormon church called in and got our state government and the member who are mostly Mormons and told them, look, this is not right. It's people who are opposing the church and opposing God. And then lo and behold, we vote to have marijuana decriminalized in our state, and guess what? Now it's back on the books as illegal, and or at least medical card only, etc. There are games being played all over the place. Now, look, I do think that Nick, I keep having to not say Fuentes,
but Nick Shirley,
that's
what you said earlier, anyway.
Yeah, it's Nick Shirley, yes. What Nick Shirley uncovered, quote unquote, in those daycare centers that he went to. For the most part, it does appear that he was lying, that they're actually running daycares. Now, I know enough about daycare centers. First of all, to know in America, you don't drop your kid off and expect to bring them into a daycare center that's not locked. Not in post Sandy Hook America, right? And so these people who go and rattle a door and anywhere in America and say, I can't believe it's locked. If this is a daycare center, why isn't there somebody at reception there? It's like, because the reception isn't walled off from where the kids are, because it's supposed to be a safe environment for kids. And we have hardened all of these places. They do it at schools. Go to a public school. You go shake a door at a public school and then peer into it and bang on the door and say, where are them kids at? I don't envy you when the police arrive and likely are already there. So, this is, and so to then make videos about it and say, well, you see, they're all fraudsters. It's like, you don't know that, you haven't proven that. And now it's been debunked. Now, does that mean that you bring up an important point, Dave, that I haven't brought up yet. Does that mean there isn't fraud in the daycare system in Minneapolis? I don't know. You apparently do.
Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot of people talking about it, and there's even a meme going around, and this is where a lot of it, at least anecdotally, what I've seen, where it started with the community was it's a picture of like a Somali dude wearing a baseball cap, big glasses, goofy look on his face. And he had a daycare center. And when he was asked to prove it, he said a burglar broke in and stole all our paperwork. Now, I mean, okay, no, but nobody buys that, right? But people take that and be like, see, Somalis, their daycare centers are like this. And I'm like, no, you just happened across one Somali who's an idiot, right? That doesn't mean all Somalis are bad. That doesn't mean all Somali daycare centers are like this. Doesn't mean all daycare centers like this, regardless of color. That one person who happened to be Somali is just a moron and couldn't come up with a better story. That's all you've proven.
Well, and for all we know, it may be true, but because here's the circumstance. I would be inclined to say we need more evidence on this, that somebody broke in and stole the students' records from this. If it wasn't in the same report has this local reporter, not some Nick Shirley out there, an actual journalist, played the voicemail recordings that these daycares were getting of people shouting and swearing about we're coming to F and get you. You better look out because we're going to get you. And it's like this sounds like people, and then showing footage from surveillance cameras of people walking up and banging on the doors and shouting about we want to see these kids or we're going or we're going to what and in mobs, in armed mobs showing up at these places and then not going away until somebody inside says you need to leave or I'm calling the police, and then all of a sudden that's a system they have respect for. They're like, oh, and then they run off.
Yeah. And I mean, those are very valid cases. And, this one guy who became a meme, and like, to me, it doesn't pass a smell test because apparently from what little I've seen about this one specific person claimed he had like hard paper copies, but not electronic copies. And to me, that's interesting because as a banker at Wells Fargo, in order to process any LLC or any corporation, in order to get like a bank account, we have to go online and look at the Secretary of State and make sure it's a registered business online. This one person could not produce online records of his business, which
Maybe I don't know which one you're talking about. Is this ABC Learning Center that you're talking about?
I honestly don't know. This is like just a meme that I saw. And I saw people talking about it. It maybe, I don't know, but I don't know. I mean, point is, this one case shouldn't have been the meme that everyone jumped on and be like, see this meme? We need an investigation. Right.
And the thing about, I talked in sermon today about Riley Gaines. Riley Gaines is a trip all in herself. I don't expect you to know who that is, Dave.
That name sounds familiar. I'm gonna Google.
She's connected to the administration because she lost. She came in tied for 5th place at one point with a trans woman.
Her. Okay, yeah. That's who I was thinking was.
She made a TikTok saying, what this whole thing in Minneapolis with daycare centers has, she's basically become a shadow voice piece, a mouthpiece for the administration, which, okay, whatever. There have always been people connected to presidential administrations, Democrat and Republican, whatever. I'm not saying that, but she's become like a de facto spokesperson for the administration in saying some of the more controversial things because she has bought hook, line, and sinker into this system that is platforming her as having been wronged, for tying with a transgender woman, but without making as little mention as possible that was in a race where they were both beat by 4 cisgender women. So whatever, fine. But she made this TikTok saying what it's supposed to mean is that we pay too much in taxes, and there's
what
right, and this has become the new trope.
Keep going.
They're saying we Americans pay too much in taxes, and it's like, okay, if you lived in Minnesota, I could understand saying you feel like you pay too much in taxes to have money given out in fraudulent deals. But that doesn't. The problem, first of all, is to blame it on immigrants only without paying any attention to how many native-born Americans are engaging in the same thing, and then turn around on the same week, all of a sudden, as if it wasn't the plan all along, the administration then cut off funding for kids programs, including feeding kids, for every state in the union, not from Minnesota, cut it off for every state in the union, and then say, oh yeah, let's turn around. All of a sudden the narrative flips out of nowhere to, oh yeah, well, we knew we were paying too much in taxes and now we can cut taxes, which is now going to become a justification for saying, let's not just stop payments for temporarily, let's stop payments altogether. And so I had made this video that perhaps is going to get me into trouble, but I happened to cut her off and make a reply saying, what taught you is not that you're paying too much in taxes. What taught you is that you hate immigrant children. And because if it were anything else, you wouldn't be backing up this policy that turned around and took food out of the mouths of children. Now, to say that you don't want your tax dollars being spent on fraud, I agree. I also don't want my tax dollars being spent on bombs dropping on children in Palestine. I don't want tax dollars being spent in Ukraine if they can't also be spent, on housing in Portland, Michigan, Portland, Oregon, where there's 7,500, at least 7,500 people sleeping rough out on the streets, and everybody standing there saying, well, they're all on drugs, without paying any attention to the fact that, okay, well, we are making record money off of selling arms to Saudi Arabia and have all this money flowing into this country through the military industrial complex, and have plenty enough money to go and help people who are on drugs, and who a lot of people on the streets are on drugs, but it's not all of them. And we could be housing these people when right in Portland itself, I just looked it up yesterday, there are 5 churches, including a Mormon church, that are sitting there empty on the market with, looking for somebody to buy them. They could turn all those churches into shelters, and they don't. And there's plenty enough money for fraud by white people and non-white people, by citizens and immigrants. But there's no money. But to turn around and say there's not money to help people who are unsheltered is just startling to me. I just can't. I can't believe these people then turn around and call themselves Christians. And
I think that sounds more like an excuse to me, because it's a matter of just priorities. Like, so I have a degree in accounting, right? And at the end of the day, it's just how money moves. Right.
Okay.
I mean, first step, is the money there? Obviously it is. So the next step is, where do you want which bank accounts do you want the money to go through? Accounts receivable, accounts payable, like, where do you want it to go?
Right.
Well, and this is why, like, other countries have surpassed the US. Even China has surpassed the US. 90% of Chinese people are homeowners. And that's not like propaganda. That's like a universally known financial fact that's demonstrable. And the reason for that is because, unlike the US that spent trillions of dollars on their military, China has spent trillions of dollars on their infrastructure. That's why everywhere you go, you can find videos, and people of the Christian faith are like freaking out, because in China, you don't even need a debit card to pay. You can walk on a bus and it scans your face and the money comes out of your account. You go to a business, you pay with your palm print, right? You look at YouTube videos of people who live in China, or like even just people who travel to like Shenzhen, Zhongqing, and it looks like literally 2050. Like high skylights, massive drone shows, like their malls are just insane, and that's because they all spend it on infrastructure. Now, obviously, the Chinese government doesn't always help their poor, but they've done a lot more than the US has. So they're much farther ahead.
But you're better informed about the Chinese economy and system than I am, so I can't speak intelligently about.
I mean, there's pros and cons. Let's just say that there's pros, and I would say some probably obvious cons from the American perspective. But it boils down to priority. At the end of the day, regardless of how people view the CCP demonstrably has spent stupid amounts of money, not on military, at least now they are, but before, from the 50s, they just shoveled it all into infrastructure.
Yeah, so like people, there used to be a thing here in America, people talked about European style socialism, which was meant as a way to kind of lump the former Soviet Union in with the policies of Finland and Norway and Scandinavian countries, as well as with Britain and Spain and Italy, that had these pro-union and frankly kind of new age socialist policies that show that collectivism, quote unquote, can work, and that we as a society, as an American society, have decided that it's evil, but that doesn't change. But the reality is that doesn't change the results they're getting. Like, I think it's Finland is using housing first initiatives to project that they will soon, I think it's like something like by 2030 or something like that, that they're going to put an end to unhousing in their whole country. Now, it's a small country, but the studies they used as the basis for starting those housing first programs were experiments done in New York. They were American housing first ideas and concepts and organizations that now that we've been able to see. I think I can, I wish I had data to show this to you because I wasn't planning to do this here, but they're trying to shame housing first policies in America now by saying we've tried it and it doesn't work. But they tried it in New York and it was successful enough that the Europeans picked it up and said, here is what works and doesn't work about it. And now it's obviously working, and they're using it to get people off the streets and get them back into the economy, and it's helping their economy flourish. People don't remember this when people talk about how many billionaires. Well, our capitalist country is the one that makes billionaires. Scandinavian countries have more billionaires per capita than we do. They are, they're creating billionaires left and right in these Scandinavian countries, and millionaires in high net. Well, I don't know about IKEA, but no, there are people locally in these Scandinavian countries. It can feel a little big brotherish to some of us in America, but they invest in businesses locally. And when there are people in the society who don't have money, they make opportunities for those people to get money. It's easy to point to that and say that's just making them lazy. The fact of the matter is, here in America, we do the same thing. We just make it illegal and call it fraud. And say, if you are the right color or from the right background and have the right political connections, we can make that fraud go away. And but I was saying this about Biden. Now, I'm sorry, I'll let you finish what you're saying there, Dave. But
and I mean, like, I do agree, and I mean, I do like the Scandinavian model. I think, and this is something that I wouldn't say is necessarily a criticism, but it's a point that should be talked about. Is one, America's much larger, and it does have the financial capacity to do so. I think the fundamental difference, though, and I'm not sure how this quite would work, is if you look at like Norway or Finland or Sweden, the population's extremely homogenous, and the the housing first initiatives and their economic structure is based around their culture. Right.
Well, specifically, what do you mean by homogenous? Because this is the part that I never get anybody to explain to me. So I'm glad I have somebody who can explain
so homogenous. So like Finland, for example, it's like 98.9% Finnish. They speak they speak Finnish. They're born there. They're raised there. Yes, you do have some immigrants. There's not really a lot of immigrants, though. So you don't have that many people bringing in other cultural aspects. And on top of homogenous, there's also the fact that Finland is historically Finnish. It became Finland. Norway has been historically Norwegian. But America historically has been a conglomerate of a bunch of different cultures colonizing the land and more people immigrating in.
Right. Immigrants and colonizers.
Yeah, immigrants and colonizers. So, I mean, the
slaves.
Point, so the point is, and then in modern history too, you have people from other countries who are like, "Hey, America's better than my country. I'm going to move there, and I'm going to, take my culture and my religion with me." There's nothing wrong with that. It's just when you have when you have so many different cultures and different cultural beliefs and practices, making one system that can cater to all of them becomes more challenging.
Right. But
as opposed to like Norway, where I mean, you like, you know, there was a Family Guy episode where like a black person goes to Norway and everyone's like losing their shit, right? It's, you know, it's exaggerated, but I mean, you know, you go to Norway, you'll pretty much encounter all Norwegians,
Mhm.
right?
This
With
is
the
why I push
Norwegian
back a little
mentality.
bit about the homogenous claim. I'm not saying that I know for a fact that it's wrong. I
Yeah.
look at it and I say, you say homogenous, and I hear racially homogenous, which is to say, well, yeah, in a country where it seems like it's to say, yeah, well, in a country where most people are white, that housing first can work. But if it wasn't, if they weren't, but in a country like America,
Sure.
where we're more racially diverse, it doesn't work. But
hmm
I feel like you're trying to say like that it has to do with more than just race. It has to do with religion. It has to do with
Yeah.
cultural
So
values that are outside of
exactly.
race.
Exactly. That's what I'm pointing at specifically is I want to really clarify that because in my anecdotal observation and opinion, this is just my view. I don't think skin color has anything to do with it. I think it has to do with culture and religion. And we can even use Burkina Faso, for instance. They're doing a housing project under Ibrahim Traoré, and he's banned Western weaves. He's kicked out the United Nations. He's got support from neighboring countries. You can like look him up on Facebook. It's actually kind of cool. He's doing a housing initiative, and it's working.
I'm going to
Now,
expose my ignorance here a little bit. I don't know who you're talking about.
yeah, so let me just he's a soldier. Let me type out his name. Ibrahim Burkina Faso. I think he's a captain. Ibrahim, he's the president of the transition. Okay. Oh, I found him. All right, let me throw this up in the chat quick. I just got to do this on my computer. Faso, and then I'll just throw up the whole stupid Google search because it comes up with all that info.
Okay.
Oh, it's never mind. It's whatever. I'll give you the Wikipedia link. I'll give you the Wikipedia link. It's much smaller. YouTube will
Okay. Oh,
accept it.
YouTube will kick it back if it's too long. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean it's in the
Well,
YouTube chat.
okay. Well, while you do that, we can talk about what region in the world is this? I don't even know.
He's in Burkina Faso in Africa.
Oh, okay. I don't know
Yeah.
much about African culture, to be honest with you.
I know bits and pieces from my followers, but I don't claim to be like an expert at all.
Okay, cool.
From what little I've seen, he's very focused on preserving the culture of his people. And they've
Okay.
got their own version of a housing first initiative, and it's working. Not because they're
there you
all
go.
black, but because everybody in that area, or at least the overwhelming majority,
Okay.
is of that culture and that religion. Mongolia, yeah.
If I'm hearing you correctly, you're saying that your explanation about homogeneity is not about Scandinavian countries being white. It's just about them being from similar cultural backgrounds with similar cultural values.
Correct.
Okay. All right. I'm willing to open up my mind to that.
Yeah.
But I mean, okay. So, I mean, and there is something to say for like culture. Like in America, we do have a culture of rugged individualism that's called out by people like Zoran Mamdani. Perhaps, a man popular enough that he made Donald Trump jealous enough when he won that election. Donald Trump invited him to the White House to try to get his popularity to rub off on him. Well, his own supporters were ranting about this man is a Muslim and he is a communist, as if those things are necessarily tied together. It's like, I guess you've never heard of the United Arab Emirates, but it's like at the same time, there are socialists in the past. There are communists, leftists who have been Muslims and use the Quran to justify that this has always been a collectivist religion. But then there are staunch capitalists who do the same thing, and the same thing's been done with the Bible, right? And so, but whether or not it's used to justify collectivism or rugged individualism, we have to say this is a cultural aspect of us that gets tied to religion sometimes, gets tied to politics sometimes, but it is a culture in our society that is comes from a colonizer mentality, which is really what has decimated Africa much more than any policies created by Islamic people. Because these guys on these Mormon podcasters, Mormon podcasters, I've brought people on that you personally know onto this show. They're out there saying this is because of Islam, that Somalia is predominantly Muslims, and that this is just the way Muslims behave, and which is, and then saying, oh, and all of a sudden the people are going to label that as racist or Islamophobic. It is. I mean, I'm happy to call it out, especially because this colonizer mentality that says, look, if you don't work, you don't eat. If you are poor, it's because you made the wrong choices in life and God is punishing you, or the system is punishing you. If you wind up unhoused and sleeping rough, I mean, I've slept in my car, as many nights as not since my separation, and I know, and you and I have talked about this. I think you don't mind talking about this, Dave. You've had to do that in the past too.
Yeah.
And this is a common thing. I tell you, going out there, traveling across the country and living out of my car part-time, I have seen what partial housing and housing insecure looks like firsthand, and how fortunate we are at having served among the unsheltered in Salt Lake. I take blankets and stuff out there. A lot of it, your feedback has been absolutely crucial. It was because of Dave that I started saying to people who have been telling me, don't get anything but used blankets to send out there because they just get destroyed. It was our conversation with you, my conversation with you, Dave, that you said sleeping bags are better. And
sleeping bags are better. They're more durable. Canned foods, they last longer. Bottles of water can be refilled.
The system
even cigarettes and smokes, like I've been homeless before, and it's like even just cigarettes and smokes, it's like, granted, it's not the most healthy of things, but at the same time, it does take off the edge of depression and other emotional states. And people have given me smokes or given me packs of cigarettes, and that's just like, okay, like, I appreciate it. I feel semi-functional enough to go do things. Because people do have addictions, and even giving someone cigarettes, they may not be a smoker, but if they're a drug addict, the cigarettes will actually help.
Right.
Because nicotine impacts the brain in a similar way.
Right.
So, and it's really hard to overdose on cigarettes. So,
I mean, we're all overdosing on them slowly, but then we're all also overdosing on sugar slowly, and we're all overdosing on a lot.
Exactly.
I mean, and frankly, I'd much rather see that people are smoking cigarettes than that they're using fentanyl or pills. So, I mean, so those are great points. See, this is the thing. The system told me, these are people who work in this all day, every day. Only give them blankets because they're just going to destroy them. I talked to somebody who has been unsheltered and been there, and the words that kept flowing back to me, and I've mentioned this several times, Dave, since you and I had this conversation. I said, my friend Dave, who now lives in Mongolia, said to me when I said, why sleeping bags particularly, Dave? Because sleeping bags are generally more expensive, but they are more durable, etc. And the people who work among the unsheltered here in Utah told me, don't do that. Don't do that, because they'll just get destroyed. And I said, but my friend Dave said to me, because it made you feel like you were human.
Yeah.
And that spoke to me, Dave, in a way
warm.
I can't say.
I was warm. Like,
but we were looking at using emergency blankets. And it was because of my conversation with you that I didn't do that.
I hate those. Those emergency aluminum foil blankets. Oh my God. They're so annoying. And I mean, like, you lay down, like you're laying down on a hard ground or asphalt, and they crinkle and they don't do much.
Right.
It's just, I hate them so much.
I mean, it is some sort of a cultural distinction, because I tell people, look, and people will come to me and gave me bags full of blankets, and I'm so grateful, and I am grateful. And please continue to send us. If you go to korahor.org, there's an address where you can send us stuff you have. You can buy off of our Amazon list, or you can just donate money if that's how you can do. But so when I tell people, I'm like, listen, if you have, I get these bags full of bedding, and come to find half of it is like fitted top sheets and sheets. And I'm like, what did you people think was going on? That I'm going to take these out to the streets, and they're going to put a fitted top sheet over their queen size mattress they happen to have thrown in the alleyway there. Why did you waste space in my car with these top sheets?
Those are still useful. Those are still useful. I mean, because they're still useful. So, I mean, like, even, okay, so, I mean, they're not, I mean, when I talk about sleeping bags and stuff and like tents, obviously that's like the ideal, right? I mean, if people want to give fitted top sheets or even just bed blankets, those are still useful. Especially during like the summer, you know what I mean? Because being in a sleeping bag in the summer can be hot. Also fitted top sheets, like depending on, and it's weather dependent, but I mean, it can be a windbreaker. If there's like foliage around, you can set it up between bushes and have some level of privacy, or, have some type of, barrier between you and the wind. Granted, it's a fitted top sheet. It won't do much, but it's something. And having been homeless myself, people get very creative, right? Yeah. It's kind of like prison. Like, you give someone who's homeless a pile of just stuff, and like you'll return the next day and there's like a little mini house just like built there out of like the most random shit you can possibly find.
Right.
So I mean, those are still useful. I was just talking about like the ideal and like what I enjoyed getting. Obviously whatever you can give helps, and whoever gets the fitted top sheets, thanks, because I mean, the heart is there, and
right.
Okay.
That's fair. That's fair.
I don't want to bash anyone who's like, I have a fitted
and nor
top
do I.
sheet I don't use.
But here's the difference, as I'm saying, is that I go out to the streets and people see me pull out sheets in the freezing cold, in snow falling down all around us in Salt Lake City, and they look at me like I'm from Mars. And they're like, what did you even bring this for? I've heard people tell me, they're like, don't you have quilts? And in our society, American society, that's immediately translated as, wow, are they ungrateful? I mean, and I'm looking at it but maybe because of my personal preferences, my personal opinions, and I've had to look people in the eyes when they say to me, when I say, hey, I got some hot coffee for you, because these people stay up all night, generally speaking, and sleep during the day when it's warm. They just try to survive the night. And I bring them hot coffee and they wouldn't take it. And I'm like, it's hot. It's coffee. It's why? And they're like, don't you have any soda? And I'd be like cold soda. It's like 20 degrees out here. You want a soda? And they're like, oh yeah. They're like, and they would ask me, could you go and get some? Maybe get some Mountain Dew or something. And I'll be like, you want soda right now? And then I did. I went and bought soda. But but it's like
so I've got my own kind of thoughts like that. They could be having withdrawal symptoms. Because,
you're speaking specifically about soda or caffeine?
So caffeine and soda, like, I've noticed this when I quit smoking and I'm cutting back on nicotine pouches. Like, I crave sugar. Right. And so I know a lot of people that's happened to. I can't speak for everyone because everyone obviously is different. But like, when you quit, say, even smoking, or you're having some type of a withdrawal symptom, or the memory of a withdrawal symptom, like if you've been off of drugs or something for, a month or so, you still might remember. Your body wants a quick high. Sugar is the easiest thing to get. That's kind of my first thought, is they might be having a nick fit, or they for whatever reason, they may have had a bunch of soda in the week before, and then they haven't had a soda recently, and You know what I mean? So, like panhandling, people go for a lot for sodas. I've seen that even in Provo. And if for whatever reason they don't get enough money panhandling for soda, they're going to be craving it because their body wants it. That could
When
be
I
another
did
thing.
when I did my first sermonizing tour, going through to Tulsa and over into Virginia, and I went through and did street preaching in Moab down in well, I didn't actually do any street preaching in New Mexico really, and went up to Oklahoma and then on to Virginia. I had about 2 days where I ran out of money and I ran out of food. And I don't talk a lot about it because it makes people really really upset. It was I'm look, I I had a van that ran
No.
and had heat and had a little bit of gas, and I stayed put until I could get paid. And I had work, and I had, I had a comfy blanket, and soon I had a comfy sleeping bag. And let me tell you, the difference sleeping in your car with a sleeping bag as opposed to a blanket or just a blanket, especially having a sleeping bag and then throw a big comforter over the top of it, it's night and day different.
Oh
And
yeah, it's
I
nice.
was yeah, I was so grateful. I'm like, "Look, I'm unsheltered at the moment, but there's a bed waiting for me in St. George, this one right back here. Anytime I need it, there are people I can call and say, "Hey, I ran out of money. Could you send Venmo me some cash so I can get some gas?" I was just at that moment too proud to do it. And but I went almost 48 hours, um, eating nothing but what I had left over in the van. And what I found remarkable was how my brain went, "Can't you get me some Red Bull? Can't you get me something sweet? Even if it's not caffeinated, get me a soda, get me some sugar." That
It's
sugar,
dopamine. It's
oh,
dopamine.
it's so
Yeah,
powerful, the sugar drive. You're absolutely
yeah.
right.
The dopamine. And that could be another thing. And some of it could be simple, like Song says. The part that the things that make people feel human. For me, it's like, I can also see that maybe they're just having a bad day and they just want a mountain Dew. Like,
Yeah,
you know, people see that as like ungrateful, but I think a lot of people just haven't been in that situation.
yeah.
Um, and that's where I kind of got into it with a couple people on the Mormon Stories podcast community about something kind of related, but not really. And it's about life experience, right? Because,
Was this recent?
people, yeah, there's a whole thread there, but there's like a debate going on where, someone said that, you know, a lot, yeah, they basically stated, to paraphrase it, that age is, you know, when it comes to like exploitation and things like that, um, there was, younger people cannot exploit older people because older people have more life experience, more education, things like that.
Mhm.
And I'm like, here's a bit about my life experience. And from what I've seen on Mormon Stories and even what John DeLitt and other Mormons say, you're born in the church, you're raised in the church, you do a stateside mission. You could be 50 years old and don't have as much life experience as someone as young as me. And my wife has more life experience and speaks more languages than I do. And she's 30.
Mhm.
So, and that's kind of tied in, um, because they lack that life experience of what it's like to be homeless and like the feelings and the sensations and everything that goes involved with that. Because I mean, when I was coming off of like heroin, oh yeah, I craved something, cigarettes, like it wasn't pretty. And I was able to like find a place. They were friends of the family and they took me in. But like, um, even up to that point, it's like I was slamming like 2 or 3 2 liters of soda a day. I was chain smoking like crazy. Um, you know,
It's a
because
dopamine fix apart from drugs. It's something
yeah,
else to
exactly.
do that just to
It
make you feel like you're not
yeah,
starving yourself to death too.
Exactly. And some of it is just like that feeling, like that feeling good, which when you're homeless, like you just those moments are few and far between.
Yeah.
Um, and like very few and far between. There's a couple times where like a stranger saw me and like I was at a youth hostel in California, or it's like an LGBT youth. I don't know where, like what specifically it was, but everything was expensive. And like a stranger saw me like trying to get jobs and like try and like do stuff. And I'm at the library and gave me $200. And it's like, holy shit. First thing I did, I bought a couple packs of cigarettes and I went to Taco Bell. I'm like, oh my God, I can like actually enjoy food that's not gas station food, or
Right.
hostel food. Like I can treat myself,
Mm-hmm. Right.
And people who have that, they're more actually likely to become functional. I don't have any data on that, but just from my experience and people I know, people who have been, lucky in that way and have gotten that support are far more likely to become functional. But people who are homeless that don't get that support and they're constantly living on gas station food, it would not surprise me if they just lose the will to live.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen that happen. So there
Same.
comes a point. Yeah, there comes a point where it's just like, what's the point?
Right. And the
So
fact that you know that you're being judged all the time, which is something, even in the brief period of time I was sleeping in my car, I felt it like all the time. It's like everywhere I
yeah.
look, like that person thinks that I don't have a job. That person thinks that I don't have family who care about me. That person thinks I don't have a home anywhere. That person thinks I live out of this van because I'm lazy. And there are all these assumptions that get made. And one of them is, you see people give money, like, and there are people who make a big deal broadcasting them giving $5, $10 to people on the streets. And then they give it to them and specifically say, use this to buy a sandwich. And the thing I hear is what I've heard all my life in America is you give them money, they're going to use it for booze or they're going to use it for drugs. And I'm like, and for me, I
I'll
look
be
at
right back, but keep going.
okay. But for me, I just look at it and I say, they're addicted to drugs. They're addicted to booze. And I've always kind of felt this way, even when I was Mormon, even before I did any of this, before this mission, is that, if somebody's addicted to drugs, you can, and addicted to alcohol, you can give them money. You can say, don't use this on drugs or alcohol. If it's money, you don't really have a choice, frankly, if it's addiction. Number two, but B, just because we judge drugs as being bad and for very good reasons doesn't mean it's not one of their needs at that time. And if you're not going to give them a warm bed to detox in, medical support to ideally to detox, and somebody who's going to take care of them and keep them safe in a place where they are safe, then say, don't use this don't use this $5 for drugs. And it's like, how arrogant are you? That's my feeling.
Well, I mean, like $5 is not buying you drugs, first of all. Personal experience. I've had people say that, oh yeah, here's $2, don't use it on drugs. And I'm like, dude, do you know how much heroin costs? Shut the hell up. But I will tell you something you may not have known. Do you know why homeless people drink booze? It's because in the winter it gives you the sensation of feeling warm.
It warms you up. That's right.
No, it doesn't warm you up. And this is why actually homeless people freeze to death, is because you think your body is warm. You feel warm, but you're not actually warm.
Right.
But you feel warm. No.
But and like that's why if it's been so long since you felt like you were a human who is at home and comfortable, you'll take fake warm over cold. But like you're saying, it can actually put you in greater risk of freezing to death.
Yes, right. But people will do it because it's a survival mechanism.
Right.
Right? It's a survival mechanism. I need to feel warm, and so they go and buy booze. Many of them, obviously there are those that are alcoholics, but many of them actually aren't. There's a lot of tricks like that that people hear about on the streets to survive, and then they're like, "Oh, I heard this trick from another person, so I'm gonna go do that."
Right.
It's you know, so and that's it's just kind of, it is what it is. Um but yeah, that's kind of like I got bitter because of the judgment, and I'm still working through that. But I don't know, in my experience people tend to get over it quickly. And of course it's case by case because I mean, there are some people who just don't have support. There are people like me that have limited support. Um but it's when it comes to the judgment, in my anecdotal experience, it's you get over it really quickly because at the end of the day, they're not giving you money, so they don't matter.
Mm.
Like my survival matters more than their opinions, and I'm going to do whatever I have to do to survive.
Hmm.
So, and that could be one factor in like giving like if you give a homeless person something like the fitted sheets in the winter, yeah, it's a little weird, but if it was summer, that's good.
Mhm.
Um, but I can kind of see that because there's a little bit of that bitterness showing where they just legit don't give a shit. Like they do not care how you feel because
Right.
they're like walled off. And that's also a survival mechanism too.
That's right.
I don't know if you've had to experience this, but like in Minneapolis and other, areas I've had too, where it's like you don't have a house, you're on the street, and you're chilling with a couple people, and then a couple dudes start walking up to you across the street, right? You're on one side, they're on this side, and they start walking at an angle to you. You have exactly 5 seconds to figure out whether or not this is going to turn into a fight, and you better
Right.
be ready for a fight in case it is.
Right.
So it's, that whole not caring about people and disconnecting from people, even that people that are trying to help you.
Mhm.
There's a lot of, kind of walled off emotions as well as, okay, what's your real motive here? At least, yeah, what's your real motive with doing this? Is this for publicity? Am I being used?
Right.
It's just a feel good? Like what's going on?
Mhm.
And add to the fact too that there's been so many cases of rich people pretending to be homeless and then getting busted driving home in like a Bentley. There is a case of that in Minnesota. So
Sure. Yeah.
it's a whole rabbit hole. Like
Right. Right.
it's a whole rabbit hole.
Well, Dave, I'm gonna have to bail on this, but man, I'm sure glad you joined in with me today. I always learn such good things from you. And
Yeah, it's always good to chill with you. I was hoping to actually jump on with Renee because like she and I don't agree with everything on everything, but she seems cool. And I've never actually had a conversation with Renee.
oh,
I just see her stuff on Facebook, and I kind of want to dig like I don't know if dig is the right word, but I would like to kind of like understand the person behind the Facebook better
yeah,
and like the YouTube channel because I looked at the YouTube channel and initially enter Facebook and initially I saw some things I kind of knew, I knew about and I could like respond with even though they disagree. But like I know she does a lot of stuff with like women and like bodybuilding and stuff and that's I know virtually nothing about those, like the women's perspective and things. So it's like I kind of want to dig a little bit deeper here as opposed to just be like, "Oh, you just work with women." Well, bye.
yeah,
So
yeah. I
it'd
would
be
say this,
interesting to
having
kind of
had,
like pick her brain a bit and kind
yeah,
of get to know her better outside of just like pixels on a screen.
right. I've had that opportunity in the last couple of weeks, and I'll tell you, she is an incredible person. I think you'll be very impressed when you get to know her. She doesn't, offer all of her opinions. She focuses on her channel on her work with women, particularly, and on deconstructing the patriarchy. And she and I am to align on that point. But it's fascinating to see, and talking to her, both what she has said publicly and behind closed doors to me, about the way the patriarchy is working in the ex-Mormon space, which is what my video was about.
Yeah, I
But
wanted
it's
to.
really curious.
I saw that, and that's something I kind of wanted to dig deeper because I have questions and I have thoughts, but you're willing to open your mind to like the cultural homogeny perspective, so I'm willing to like open my mind on this.
Do you know Divas? Divas Lazarus?
Well, I've heard of him. I haven't been on a podcast with him, but I used to hang out on his channel a bit, and then things happened, and I'm like, what the hell?
Yeah. I will say this: Divas knows a lot about that same story. If you want somebody else's perspective on it, Divas knows a lot about it. Divas, he does some weird stuff, and I don't know how much of what he's been accused of by Mormon discussions, etc., is true, and I don't know. But I can tell you, I stopped platforming him on my show. Oh, I never really platformed him on here. But
No.
he platformed me on Mormon News Roundup, and I was appreciative of that. And he and I have stayed in touch. And I'll say this: while the whole ex-Mormons world is happy to burn Divas and Mormon News Roundup to the ground, he knows a lot of inside baseball. So if you're interested in hearing from him, that being
About
said,
Mormonism or about what specifically?
about
Like
the ex-Mormon podcast space.
Okay, I would say, yeah, that would be interesting because I would say I would have like a competent knowledge, but not like an in-depth, not to that degree. Because I've been on like the Exmo side more now, but I've also been on like Ward Radio side. Again, not on the podcast, but just I was one of the main super chatters.
That's
So
That's true, Tim. Just calling out to the audience.
yeah,
I don't know how much of that is true about
yeah,
doxing culture. I didn't, and Divas and I have had very direct conversations about that. I'm going to be blunt with you. I don't know that he did it, and I don't necessarily buy that he did it. But I don't know.
Yeah, but back on topic, it would be cool to get to know Rene because like one of the things I've noticed, and this isn't just in the Exmo podcasting space, but it's in like I'm in the YouTube gaming space, and I'm in just other spaces too. And what I'm noticing generally is that men are more willing to like put their names out there and get out there and talk about these things. And for whatever reason, women are not doing so. And I kind of want to know her thoughts on that because, on the one hand, I can see where people like John Dehlin do kind of dominate the space just with sheer size. But on the other hand, I think there's also something to be said for if people don't want to be podcasters and they just happen to be women, is that a problem? And
Mm.
I'm trying to reconcile the two, if that makes sense,
Mm.
because I remember I'm big into Minecraft, and Hermitcraft is the world's largest Minecraft community, and they work with Mo Yang. They were even a part of the Minecraft movie. And there was a girl that asked, like, why aren't there more Minecraft girls? Like, why aren't women doing, like, why aren't there more hermit crafters on YouTube that are women? And Impulse, it wasn't Impulse, I forget his name. But the founder of Hermitcraft said, we've reached out to the women. They don't want to do it. They don't want to have their names known. They don't want to be famous, but there are many that enjoy the game still.
Mm.
Right. So I want to reconcile that element and see kind of like what Renee's thoughts are. Because I don't know if this is a cultural thing. I don't know if it's a sociological thing, or I just don't know if when it comes to the Exmo podcast space specifically, if we as men are more confident in expressing our opinions because, if people come after us, it's, I I don't know how to word it, so I'm just gonna say it. Like, if someone comes after me as a guy, I'm ready for a fight.
Right.
But because
Yeah,
women are
that's it
attacked,
exactly. Actually.
but women are attacked differently, that may scare them off from doing it. You know what I mean? And that could be a reason. I don't know. I would love to hear her thoughts.
I think you're right on the right track. I won't speak for Rene because I have had that pretty much that exact conversation with her, and I think that she could speak for herself with you if it's in confidence, or if it's if you want to go live and talk about it. She's happy to tell you about that and she's good insight on that. But I can tell you from my perspective, what I've been talking about with respect to it is we as men, especially in the ex-Mormon space, but in any patriarchal system, and that's all over the world, as you know, there are all sorts of cultures that are patriarchal.
Yeah.
Most, in fact, I would say. Male privilege is real. And part of that for me is about violence and the threat of violence. And that when you grow up an assigned male at birth, and you stay identifying as male, as a boy, as a man. From my experience, I learned as a child to be safe is to show that you are violent, and that you are violent and capable, or at least that you are capable of violence. And while it's easy to point at that and say, wow, you guys really are toxic, and so forth, and that's fair, that's totally accurate. At the same time, it's a survival mechanism. So with that paradigm, we generally don't understand, I think, from my conversations with women, is that women tend to say, your defensiveness feels like violence. And so we get defensive and create this system where we get defensive. Women will tend to back away from it rather than escalate to something where they feel unsafe. Even if you don't threaten them with violence, women, in my experience, and I don't speak for women, but speaking from this, is when they talk about, particularly about toxic masculinity in the patriarchy, they're talking about, even when you don't tell me, in Rene's word, sit down, girl, sit down and shut up. Even when you don't say that in words, the impression is there just from the dynamics of, you have this culture where men defend themselves by getting violent. Oh, and that's the boss. I'm gonna have to bail. It's good to talk to you, Diamond Dave.
We should do a podcast sometime, maybe around the same time together.
I like that. You have my number, right?
Well, I have a Mongolian phone number, and I don't want to pay long distance. Facebook.
Well, Facebook. Contact me today. We'll set it up.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. Have fun.
All right, you guys. Thank you very much. Bye. And we'll see you soon. Good talk to you, Dave. Bye.